What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Quarter Podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V, and it is March 25th, 2026 when I am recording this. This is your rankings and recognitions episode for Week 6 of the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season. This is concerning all games, players, performances from March 16th all the way to March 22nd. And we got a full episode on this one. Make sure you stick around at the end because we're going to talk about our end of the year awards here, as well as our mid-season award race updates. Briefly, the big one will come next week, but make sure you tune in to that at the end of this episode. Without further ado, though, let's go ahead and hop right into it. All right, now let's go ahead and start with Playmaker of the Week here. Per usual, so many great players to consider here, so many great performances. This recognition obviously goes to the player that has been the best, or we believe has been the best this week here. And like I said, there's always so many players to pick from. Obviously, you have your statistical leaders, which, we'll talk about here in this next segment after this one. But, it's also about who you're playing and the significance of your win as well. And so at the end of the day, it really came down to 3 players that myself, Kodey, and Gino put up for Week 6 Playmaker of the Week. And we're going to go down the line and talk about each and every single one of them here. Let's start with Barton College's Valerie Ainge Bada, and excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, but she had an excellent Week 6 here, played in 4 games, and actually had to fill in at quarterback. Sora Rigdon for Barton College did not start at quarterback, but Valerie Ainge Bada did. They played Chowan, so there's that, but still played very well against Chowan in the 2 games they played. In game 1, 158 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, 74 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Also caught 6 receptions for 51 yards. In their second game, had 275 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 59 rushing yards. Did throw a pick though, but very successful. And then later on that week, they would play both Wingate and Mars Hill on the same day. And against Wingate in a big conference game, 4 receptions, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns in the win. And then against Mars Hill, 5 receptions, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also caught a pick 6 in that game as she kind of lit up the stats here for last week, and also got a big win in the Conference Carolinas against Wingate while keeping them afloat versus Chowan. Now, let's go ahead and go all the way to the West Coast here. We have Ariana Rivera of La Sierra, their quarterback, playing in that GSAC Jamboree and getting some big wins in that Jamboree as they pull closer to hope. And I believe they have secured the 2nd spot in that conference for now. But a lot of that was thanks to Ariana Rivera and her performances versus Arizona Christian, 232 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 29 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. Versus Ottawa, Arizona, OUAZ, 33 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 6 rushing yards. And then versus Benedictine Mesa, 195 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 picks, 39 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns in a game where they had a 20-point fourth quarter. Make sure you check out episode 505 for that game recap. But Ariana Rivera would lead this offense into having a 20-point fourth quarter where they would narrowly beat Benedictine Mesa 33-27 here. A massive win for La Sierra, as I believe, like I said, that is 3 straight wins to go ahead and pull close to at least the 2nd place spot here in the GSAC here. So that's absolutely massive with them as they were trying to chase down hope. But that is a big performance by Ariana Rivera of La Sierra to help them out in conference play. And then last but not least, speaking of conference play, but we're going to go to the Midwest. We have Abby Flowers of Illinois College in her game versus North Park, a game where they only won 28-26. She went off. And by the way, it was Illinois College's first ever home game at England Stadium in Illinois. And so make sure you check out that game recap that I actually did in episode 505. That was a banger of a game, and she had a massive impact on that one as she had brought in 14 receptions for 251 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns in, like I said, a close game, a 2-point win over North Park. But that was a massive win to go ahead and get, I believe, in conference and then also win one at home. That's always important for a program, getting success at home, especially the first one there, and it looked like to be a pretty packed out game, so congrats to them. But Abby Flowers is definitely in consideration for Playmaker of the Week. But once again, there could only be one Playmaker of the Week for Week 6 here, and we have decided to go with Ariana Rivera of La Sierra in her performances this past weekend, including that big one against Benedictine Mesa, where she came back and won that game. And yeah, I mean, not only did she play some pretty quality opponents, at least for that conference, but, she put up some great numbers, and that comeback, a 20-point fourth quarter to go ahead and win by a score over Benedictine Mesa, that is definitely legendary there. So your 2026 Week 6 Playmaker of the Week is Ariana Rivera, the quarterback out of La Sierra. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and get into our fantasy point leaders for Week 6. Let's go ahead and start with the total fantasy point leaders. These are the players that scored basically the most fantasy points in Week 6. And in case you don't know how this works, basically players get points for stats. If you've ever played fantasy football, it works that way. We use ESPN Standard for our scoring, but we do say this: touchdowns of any type scored is definitely worth 6 points here. So just keep that in mind. And then if they play both ways, we do keep interceptions as a stat as well. So there you go there. But I have went ahead and separated quarterbacks and offensive skill players once more. Let's go ahead and start with the quarterbacks this week. And this week we got some new faces. No Catherine Hutchinson playing this week, so obviously that opens up a spot. But let's go ahead and start at number 10 here. Janelle Francis of Wingate, who has come in the place of Sailor Swanson, who unfortunately has a broken hand. But Janelle Francis has stepped in for Wingate, and at the very least, she has produced. Versus Barden, 215 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Did throw 3 picks, but also ran for 201 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in a big-time performance. 46.7 fantasy points there. Unfortunately, couldn't get the win, but like I said, big numbers in that game versus a quality opponent. She would also play Mount Olive, where she had 99 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, and then 84 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 34.36 points, for a grand total of 81.06 points here in Week 6. At number 9 is Gianna Visco of Gallaudet, their quarterback, versus Keystone, 155 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 51 rushing yards for 39.3 points. Versus Karen here, 240 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 86 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 44.2 points, for a grand total of 83.5 points scored in Week 6 against those United East Conference opponents. At number 8 is Gianna Reyes of St. Francis versus Graceland. 384 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 18 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns for 49.16 points. I believe that is the most passing yards she has thrown for in her career, and she's just a freshman, so congrats to her. But they continued against Midland. 260 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 69 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 39.3 points, for a grand total of 88.46 points scored for St. Francis. At number 7 is Sora Rigdon of Barton College. Even when she missed 2 games last week, still balled out and made our top 10 here. In her 2 games versus Wingate, 237 yards, 4 touchdowns, 58 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 45.28 points. And then versus Mars Hill, 275 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 13 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 48.3 points. That is good enough for 93.58 points here in week 6. Then we got a Maya Pablo of Lindsey Wilson. They played Wittenberg twice here. They made no distinction between the 2 games they played. So, versus Wittenberg in the 2 games she played, 368 total passing yards, 9 total passing touchdowns, also 133 rushing yards and 2 total rushing touchdowns for a grand total of 94.02 points for Amaya Pablo of Lindsey Wilson. At number 5 is your Playmaker of the Week, Ariana Rivera of La Sierra. Versus Arizona Christian, 232 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 29 rushing yards, and another rushing touchdown for 48.18 points. Versus OUAZ, 233 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 6 rushing yards for 19.92 points. And then versus Benedictine Mesa, 195 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, did throw 2 picks, but also had 39 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns for 31.7 points for a grand total of 99.8 points. At number 4 here, I believe is a first-timer, Nadia King of Penn State Harrisburg versus Lancaster Bible, 74 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 140 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and also caught an interception for 60.96 points. Versus Cedar Crest, 141 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 35 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown. Also caught a 17-yard receiving touchdown, and then also caught 2 interceptions on defense for 40.84 points for a grand total of 101.8 points in week 6. Only 2 games, by the way. At number 3 is Sophia Wright of Simpson, who is coming alive here, versus Ottawa, Arizona, 195 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, 47 rushing yards for 36.5 points. Versus Arizona Christian, 217 passing yards, 2 interceptions thrown, but 30 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 13.68 points. And then versus Benedictine Mesa, 327 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns and a pick, but 38 rushing yards as well for 56.88 points for a grand total of 107.6 points. At number 2 is another new face here. It is Madison Woodard of Cumberland versus Illinois Wesleyan, 227 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 39.08 points. Versus Milligan, only had 25 passing yards, so that's a grand total of 1 point pretty much there. Versus Winston-Salem, 254 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 picks, but also added on a rushing touchdown for 46.16 points. And then against Mars Hill, 254 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns for 40.16 points for a grand total of 126.4 points. Good enough for second here in week 6. But as far as quarterbacks go, it is the longtime quarterback of Milligan and somebody who's been a constant on this list for the last couple weeks, Bridget Kaiser. Versus Illinois Wesleyan, 264 yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown for 64.5 points. Versus Cumberland, 211 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns for 19 rushing yards and 19 rushing yards as well for 46.34 points. And then versus King, 267 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown for 52.68 points for a grand total of 159.52 points. Statistically, your most productive quarterback from week 6. Now, going to non-quarterbacks here. For the most part, I will say the number 1 spot was a player who started 2 games at quarterback, so just keep that in mind. But the rest of these are non-quarterback players, and because of that one person, we are going to add one more to our top 10 to make it a top 11, just to highlight more players. But at 11 is Ashton Weirley of Milligan versus Illinois Wesleyan, 41 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, plus 5 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown for 25.3 points. Versus Cumberland, had 29 passing yards and a passing touchdown, but also 24 rushing yards, 5 receptions, 53 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown for 25.86 points. And then in her last game, she had 26 passing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, 6 receptions for 75 receiving yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And that was actually against Kings. So there you go for 22.6 points for a grand total of 73.76 points. Now at number 10 is Zanaya Long of Barton College versus Chowan in Game 1. 8 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown for 21.5 points. In Game 2 against them, 4 for 34 and a touchdown for 13.4. Versus Wingate later that week, 7 receptions, 110 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a pick caught for 32 points. And then versus Mars Hill, 1 reception for 12 yards and a touchdown for 8.2 points for a grand total of 75.1 points. Now at number 9, only ahead by 0.1 points compared to the number 10 spot, is Haley Witherspoon of St. Francis. Believe this is her first time on this list here, but versus Graceland, 7 receptions, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a caught pick for 32.3 points. And then versus Midland, a great game there as well. 10 receptions, 129 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, also caught a pick 6 for 42.9 points for a grand total of 75.2 points. Now just ahead of her by 0.1 points, yes, 10, 9, and 8 are all separated by 0.1 points from each other, is Jade Zaremka of Gallaudet versus Keystone, 7 receptions, 53 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns for 30.3 points. And then versus Cairn here, she had 13 receptions for 140 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns for 45 flat points right there for a grand total of 75.3. At number 7 is another familiar face, Riley Bolser of Weber versus Reinhardt, 7 receptions, 111 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns for 41.1 points. And then versus Life, 32 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, interesting enough there. And then 13 receptions, 89 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown for 35.18 points. At number 6 is Krista Quinn of Milligan, another familiar face, versus Illinois Wesleyan, 4 receptions, 36 yards, 2 touchdowns for 19.6 points. Versus Cumberland, 5 receptions, 70 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for 24 points. And then versus King, 9 receptions, 86 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Also caught an interception, good enough for 37.6 points, which totals up to 81.2 points. At number 5 is Saren Merritt of Barton College versus Chowan in Game 1, 9 receptions, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns for 31.9 points. And then in Game 2, 6 receptions, 194 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns for 49.4 points. And then some quieter games against Wingate, 2 receptions for 14, good for 3.4. And then versus Mars Hill, 3 for 40, good enough for 7 points, for a grand total of 91.7 points altogether in Week 6. At number 4 is a first-timer here, and that is Holiness Hodges of Midland, the freshman over there, versus St. Francis, 3 rushing yards, 7 receptions, 142 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for 33.5 points. Versus Campbellsville, 18 receptions, 132 yards, and a touchdown, and 9 rushing yards for 38.1 points. And then versus Siena Heights, 11 receptions, 109 yards for 21.9 points for a grand total of 93.5 points for the first-timer. At number 3, I believe is another first-timer, Alice Davis of Holy Family versus Centenary, 80 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and a 19-yard reception for 28.9 points. And then versus Marywood, 55 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 85 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions, 95 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a pick 6. I believe the first player to have 2 passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, and receiving touchdowns, and a defensive touchdown for a grand total of 66.3 points. And then for an actual total of 94.2 points right there for Alice Davis of Holy Family. At number 2 is Marley Hyde of Cumberland versus Illinois Wesleyan, 6 receptions, 53 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for 23.3 points. And then versus Milligan, 80 passing yards, did throw 4 interceptions, which is tough, 31 rushing yards, and a reception for 4 yards. Actually, negative 0.3 points here. But then versus Winston-Salem, bounce back here. 6 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 10 receptions, 116 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for 40.24 points. And then versus Mars Hill, 7 receptions, 106 passing yards, and 3 receiving receiving touchdowns, 106 receiving yards, and then 3 receiving touchdowns for 35.6 points, and a grand total of 98.84 points. And then last but not least is Valerie Ainge-Bada of Barton College. Like I said, started 2 games at quarterback for Barton against Chowan. In game 1, 158 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, 74 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Also still 6 receptions for 51 yards for 58.82 points. Versus Chowan, 275 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, 59 rushing yards, and an interception for 54.9 points. And then back at receiver versus Wingate, 4 receptions, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 25.5 points. And then versus Mars Hill, 5 receptions, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also caught a pick 6 for 36.6 points to go ahead and come together at a grand total of 174.82 fantasy points for Valerie Ainge-Bada of Barton College, who is technically the highest scoring non-quarterback here in week 6. But like I said, that's why we made it a top 11 instead of a top 10 this week. So there you go. Those are your total points leaders. Now, last but not least, going into your leaders for the most points scored in an individual game. So these are the players with technically the biggest statistical impacts here in a single game from week 6. Starting at number 10 is Destiny Lockett of Thomas versus Florida Memorial. Back in at quarterback, 259 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick thrown, but 82 rushing yards and a touchdown to make up for it for 52.56 points, At number 9 is Bridget Kaiser of Milligan versus King, 267 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown for 52.68 points. At number 8 is Valerie Ainge-Bada of Barton College versus Chowan, specifically, I believe, in Game 2. 275 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, and 59 rushing yards there for 54.9 points. At number 7 is Sophia Wright of Simpson versus Benedictine Mesa. 327 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 38 rushing yards for 56.88 points. At number 6 is Abby Flowers of Illinois College versus North Park. 14 receptions, 251 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns for 57.1 points. At number 5 is Kennedy Young of Huntington versus Hendricks. 271 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, also 51 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 57.94 points. At number 4 is Nadia King of Penn State Harrisburg, specifically versus Lancaster Bible. 74 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 140 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. Also caught an interception for 60.96 points. And actually, she is in third. In fourth is actually Valerie Ainge-Bada of Barton College versus Chowan in Game 1. 158 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 74 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, also 6 receptions for 51 yards. That is who's in third. And then who I just said for originally in Nadia King of Penn State Harrisburg, she is actually in third, while Valerie Ainge-Bada is in fourth. So, excuse me, I feel like I'm saying it wrong. But Valerie Ainge-Bada in fourth, Nadia King in third. In second is Bridget Kaiser of Milligan versus Illinois Wesleyan, 264 passing yards, 8 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown for 64.5 points. And then in first place is Alice Davis of Holy Family versus Marywood, 55 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 85 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 receptions, 96 rushing yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a pick 6 for 66.3 points here. I believe that is your maybe first ever non-quarterback going ahead and winning the most points scored in an individual game, at least here in a couple weeks. So there you go there. That is your top 10 in individual game fantasy points scored. All right, now coming up, we have your PMC Fantasy League update. Just as a reminder, myself, Kodey, and Gino have drafted teams. We have added and dropped players, and these players are women's college flag football players. Obviously, the players who perform the best statistically get the most points, and I basically just take the players who scored the most and add them to the format we have, which is 2 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, and 2 technically flex players, but it's really just wide receivers or extra ones, which is what it is there. And then we add it up and we see who wins. Last week, very embarrassing week for myself here. A low scoring week, but we bounced back a little bit. And then Gino had a great week last week, getting another win. But we are going to go ahead and start with the team who scored the least, which is Kodey's team, scoring the least amount of points, at least since week 1. In week 2, scored 233 points total in week 6 here for Kodey. Only 207.42 points scored. The big thing that really killed Kodey here is that Catherine Hutchinson not playing this week definitely got him. And so he only could play one quarterback because he only has one other quarterback in Ava Wallace. And actually, funny enough, even right now, only has one other quarterback in Ava Wallace, who had a great week, 71.64 points, but definitely a big hit to take here. Kaden Swarmers had 43.7 points, Ashley Clam, 27.6 points, Addie Schillick, not too far from Ashley Clam, actually, 22.6 points. Olivia Dominguez-Millsop of Midland, 23.88 points, and then Aaliyah Wood, only 18 points here. Like I said, for a grand total of 207.42 points. But just not close at all. Catherine Hutchinson has kind of been putting in a lot of work here, and it was definitely just a down week for Kodey. For Gino, not a bad week, but also the lowest scoring week for him since week 3, and it is because of Warner again. No Anna Vincenzini, no Jessica Finley, no Avalon Lux Offerman, and the hit was kind of rough here, but a decent performance here. A grand total of 394.94 points. Lazariana Herrera, 50.72 points. Bridget Kaiser, I believe, had her highest scoring week here, 159.52 points as she held it down. But then you have Caitlin Sigmundy down here at 14.5 points. Ashton Weirley had a great week, though, with 73.76 points. Tatiana Dos Santos, only 14.7 points in one game. And then Janasia Wilson coming back here, but doing decent, 24.3 points. And then Sanaya Waller technically started a game at quarterback, but, was utility before that. I don't know. I think I'll count it here. That's one game at quarterback. So she scored 57.44 points, which really helped Gino get to 394.94 points here. So I'll count it. Not a bad week here, but not as good as the last 2 weeks. That is for sure. But you know what? My team took advantage this week and had a great week. I'm getting my second win since week 1 after a tough week 5 performance. 524.38 points scored here. And, it was a great week. I think it was a good all-around performance from the squad here. Let's start at quarterback. Sawyer Rigdon only played 2 games, still scored in the 90s, 93.58 points here, playing great. Maya Pablo only played 2 games, but like I said, still scoring in the 90s, going crazy, 94.02 points there. Krista Quinn had a great week, 81.2 points. I think that is the most, maybe, that she has scored in a week of this season, so that's awesome. Haley Witherspoon was a pickup that I got right before they played here of St. Francis, 75.2 points there. Riley Bolser had a big week as well. Has had a couple big weeks in a row here, actually, but this is the most points she has scored this season here in week 6, 76.28 points here. Saren Merritt had a big week, more so early on, kind of had a little bit of a quieter week at the end on Saturday, but still 91.7 points, which is huge. And then Tramisha Harris kind of slotted her in here, 12.4 points, which is solid for sure, for a grand total of 524.38 points. So there you go. I pick up my second win here. I think each of us has one. Let me double check this. Okay, just checked it. Through 6 weeks, each of us has won twice. I got week 1 in week 6. Kodey got week 2 in week 3. And then Gino won week 4 and week 5. So, it's definitely getting interesting. We're going to see who's going to be the champ here as we have a couple more weeks of the season left. We're about midway through the season, but we'll see how much longer we go, depending on regular seasons and whatnot. But we will see. It is definitely heating up, though. I didn't do drops and ads last week. I think I was definitely a little salty, but we did them this week. So let's go ahead and talk about it, right? So unfortunately, I had to drop Addie Cadwell, Kyla Massenberg, and then Marley Spielberg. They're just not playing a lot of games. Also, they spread it out a whole bunch. So there's that. And then all of us do gain a spot because technically I dropped defenses as well. I haven't figured it out. I also just don't have time to figure it out. So we all have an extra spot now. Currently, I added a number of players. Only 2 of them played last week. So 2 of them I added before games last week, and that was Claire Strong of Aurora, wide receiver, and then I added St. Francis's wide receiver Haley Witherspoon before they played, and so they got to contribute. On top of that, I also got to add Holiness Hodges of Midland, unfortunately after her big time weekend, but I had to add her. She has been balling out as a freshman. I added Janelle Francis of Wingate here, so another quarterback option. And then I also added Yvonne Brussel of Wingate, playing wide receiver for them, also turning it up on defense as well. And so those are my adds for this week here, and I guess last week as well. Only added 2 last week, and then added a couple more. And I don't know. We haven't decided yet. We have a group chat where we talk about all of our ads and drops and stuff like that. So we're stuck on a couple people, not naming names, but there's only 2 other people, and so we got to see what they decide here before I make one more ad before this upcoming week here. So there you go. But those are my ads. Let's go ahead and go to Kodey, who did not drop anybody and has made the least amount of moves, but has added a wide receiver instead of a quarterback. So Kodey has added Deborah Aguirre from Simpson. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully Catherine Hutchinson and Ava Wallace, never get hurt and play enough games. But I'm not gonna comment on that. If Kodey wants to do that, that is totally fine. But Deborah Aguirre being added here by Kodey. Gino has made a decent amount of ads here, or at least one big ad, I would say, and might even make another one after this. But firstly, Gino has dropped Carly Yoakley, and then obviously has an open spot because of Ottawa's defense being dropped here. But Gino has went ahead and added Valerie Ainge-Bada of Barden here, so that'll be a great pickup for Gino. But there you go. As of week 6, we are tied at 2-2-2, each of us having 2 wins. We'll see who gets the tiebreaker here in week 7. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and get into the rankings here. A quick reminder on how we do these. Myself and the rest of our rankers rank teams 1 through 25. If I rank a team at 25, at number 1, then they get 25 points, 2, 24, and so on and so on. If I rank a team at 25, they get 1 point. And then, so those are our rankings. Those are individual. And then for our PMC rankings, I add up all the points that each team has earned through the rankings, and then that's how I rank them. The more points, the better for sure here. And so when I read through the reasons that some of our rankers have for moving a team up or down, they might be referring to their personal rankings. So just wanted to make sure I put that out there. Now, there are teams who get ranked, get points, but don't exactly make our top 25. So we'll talk about them for sure. But let's go ahead and talk about last week's rankings, which was a little interesting. Just that was Gallaudet, Immaculata, Lise McRae, and Illinois Wesleyan. At 25 was a 3-way tie between Ventura College, Cypress, and Irvine Valley. At 24 was Huntingdon, 23 St. Francis, 22 Siena Heights. Tied at 20 was Eastern and Midland. 19 was Hope, 18 Barton College, 17 Saddleback, 16 Thomas, 15 Nevada State, 14 Lindsey Wilson, 13 Daytona State, 12 Life, 11 Ferrum, 10 Wingate. Tied at 8 is Weber and St. Thomas. Tied at 6 is Kansas Wesleyan and Baker. 5 is Milligan, 4 Kaiser, 3 Ottawa, 2 Florida Gateway. And at number 1 is Warner. Now, this week we have a couple teams that did not quite make our top 25 here, and I'll make sure to read the comments on those. But just out here is Penn State Harrisburg, Emmanuel, Thomas, and Lise McRae. And actually, Thomas and Lise McRae were closer to making our top 25 than the other two. So just pointing that out. But let's go ahead and see what our rankers had to say about that. Let's start with Thomas here. Kodey said they're almost completely settled in here at 18. So Kodey has them in here at 18, but then says, but are still rocking an above 500 record for now, but have brutal contests ahead on the road against Warner and Weber. Women's College Flag Football, make sure you check them out at womenscollegeflagfootball.com and on social media. He had to say no team has had to run a harder gauntlet. Thomas took down Florida Memorial 40-13, but dropped a tough 25-12 game to St. Thomas. Their 6-5 record is deceptive, having a brutal strength of schedule. Now, this is what I have to say about Thomas. It is very hard ranking them here in the top 25 when you have other teams who are, getting their season started, haven't played as many games here, but they have started undefeated. And they are not only undefeated, but winning those games by margins of victory of 50 plus, right? And so it's hard to justify a team. At least this is my mindset when ranking, not ours. But for me, it's hard to justify ranking a team who is just a game over 500 when you have other teams around the country who are undefeated. And so it gets into a whole thing of strength of schedule, and, it's very much the SEC versus Big 12 argument for sure here, or Big 10, mind you. Well, okay, that's not fair. The Big 10 is definitely better, at least last season. But, it's that type of argument. And as the game develops, this is something that's going to happen more. And so we'll see what happens. This is why we have multiple rankers. That is just my opinion, though. And that is why I did not rank them personally. But you have other people that do. Now, another team that is not in our top 25, PMC top 25, but got votes, is Emmanuel. Women's College Flag Football said a tough 14-0 defensive slugfest against Ferrum, but bounced right back to blank Mount St. Mary's 7-0. With weapons like QB Lillian Stevenson and Gianna Brown, Emmanuel has the foundation pieces to compete. And I agree with that. I don't know if it's this year, right? But maybe next year. They definitely got some players for sure, though. I like the receiving core. I think the quarterback has some talent over there. She just needs to develop and get games under her. And then we have Penn State Harrisburg. Gino had this to say about them. Lots of blowouts so far to put their names in bold amongst these other teams just starting out their season. Women's College Flag Football said undefeated and certainly passing the eye test early. And yeah, I gotta agree. Penn State Harrisburg was a team that, I considered ranking. I don't think I had them in I did actually. I had them ranked at 25 here, and so did Gino. And then Women's College Flag Football had them as an honorable mention here. But, that's the team I'm saying that has won multiple games by 50 plus. Them and Gallaudet are battling in the United East so far and should be due for a big matchup here later this week. So there is that, and I think they definitely deserve some recognition. And then you have Lise McRae here, who I have ranked, but they did not play this last week. I think playing this week, I kind of expect them to move back up depending on if they win or not. We will see, though. Now, let's go ahead and get to our actual top 25. Starting at 25, we have Aurora here, who is making their debut in our top 25 rankings. Aurora University out of Illinois. This is what our rankers had to say. This is what Women's College Flag Football had to say about them. First-year Spartans keep quietly winning. They improved to 4-0 with a dominant 51-19 showing against Bryan and Stratton. JUCO in Wisconsin, proving they have the firepower to keep climbing the board. And I got to agree with that. They've had a couple games postponed because of weather here, so they definitely should have more games under their belt. But, it is what it is. They play who's ahead of them. Those games will be rescheduled here. And so I think they have a lot of talent, and, they make their debut right here at 25. Alrighty, now at 24 is Ventura College here. They actually move up one spot. Last week they were tied for 25th. And mind you, these reasons were written out on Monday, early on Monday or Sunday here. And a couple games have already happened, as it is the 25th when I am recording this. But Kodey had this to say: another victory for the Pirates, but they'll have to reaffirm their spot against Irvine Valley. Gino says Ventura is very intriguing and are definitely in the mix for the top teams in their conference. And I would have to agree. They're in a kind of a weird spot with Saddleback and Cypress here. And I guess you could throw in Irvine Valley as well, as it's very competitive between those four. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Yeah, we'll see. Now, at 23, speaking of, is Cypress, who does move up 2 spots here. Kodey says this squad has pulled out 2 thrilling wins over Irvine Valley and Saddleback back-to-back to spring into my rankings. We'll see if they can maintain the consistency, as that's been their problem, but they have a cumulative winning record over the next 2 JUCOs and squads on my list. Gino says handing Saddleback their first loss of the season makes you an easy top 20 team in the country. There were so many clutch plays in that game, it was insane. And yeah, I got absolutely, agree with that. Massive win for Cypress here to go ahead and knock out Saddleback. That does make things very interesting between all the Cali JUCOs over there, as Cypress throws a wrench into it all. But, even before then, they were playing very well, so it's no surprise. They were kind of hot going into that game, so you definitely love to see that. But Cypress moving up here a couple spots in our rankings. Now tied at 21 is Gallaudet and Saddleback. Let's go ahead and talk about Saddleback first, since we've been talking about their other JUCO counterparts here in Cali. Starting with Gino, right back outside of the top 20. They almost came back against Cypress, but they got handed their first loss instead. Women's college flag football said a loss to Cypress is not the only reason for the fall. The results have been razor thin against solid but not great competition. The OEC is deep but starting to devour itself. And I actually agree with that last sentence there. Kodey says a small setback, but one that ultimately might help Saddleback compete for a conference chip here. And yeah, I also agree with that as well. It is a tough loss. It's not like a blowout loss or anything for sure. At the end of the day, they still only have one loss, and it's a close one. So for me, they stay in the top 25. But, they got to keep winning, and you just got to kind of hope that they get their get back here eventually for them to move any farther. Now, tied with them is Gallaudet, who is currently undefeated in United East play. Gino says great start to the year so far. Women's college flag football said the Bison's high discipline system continues to overwhelm opponents. They secured 2 blowout victories this week, dropping 32 on Cairn and 54 on Keystone. And yeah, they've played really good football. They are undefeated. On top of that, they are a conference champion as well. You got to keep that in mind. And they're defending it so far very well. They got a big one this week here against fellow undefeated team Penn State Harrisburg. I think the winner of that one will mean the difference of who's in this top 25 spot. So we'll see. Now to go ahead and start our top 20 here, we have Immaculata, who moves up 7 spots from being unranked. Not here before, mind you, but with the other losses in conference, they definitely move up. Kodey said this after seeing how good Eastern has looked, and in turn Marymount. I figured this spot belonged to the Mighty Macs, who remain undefeated early in their season. Women's college flag football says Immaculata surges to a perfect start. They swept their weekend matchups with ease, shutting out Chestnut Hill 32-0 and handling Newman 27-6. Matchup with Eastern awaits here, or at least at the time they're writing it awaited. Gino said Atlantic East play has been all over the place, but Immaculata remains unbeaten so far. And yeah, I mean, with other teams losing and then being the lone undefeated team or the last undefeated team in conference, that definitely matters. So Immaculata right here at 20. Now at 19 is Huntington, who moves up 5 spots here, really benefiting from the chaos that is going on with the California JUCOs, as well as the chaos going on the East Coast with the Atlantic East here. But Kodey said this, good for this squad getting multiple games against Hendrix, I guess. Women's college flag football said the Hawks posted 3 straight shutouts this week as they keep rolling, blanking Hendrix twice, 32-0, 58-0, and then rolling over Millsap 68-0. Gino says Huntington is killing their competition right now with no end in sight. They only have a few games left, including one against Milligan, to potentially do some damage there, and I agree. That Milligan game will be a big opportunity for a team who has been having the best season in program history so far. Short program history, but definitely the best one. Kennedy Young is playing at a high level, as well as that receiving core that is very deep. So we'll see how far they could go, for sure. Now at 18 is Wingate, who as of late has been moving up and down pretty aggressively here. This week they are now down 8 spots here. And just as a reminder, I am recording this on the 25th, so some games have happened. But this rankings and our reasons were posted, or the rankings were posted on the 23rd, and the reasons were put in before all the games on the 23rd as well. So just keep that in mind. But Wingate's right here at 18. Let's start with Gino. He says injuries suck, but Wingate still has 2 tough games against Ferrum and Milligan this week nonetheless. Huge test for the Bulldogs. Women's college flag football set a battle-tested squad that split their week. They looked elite in a 41-0 shutout over Mount Olive, but simply couldn't keep pace in a 38-27 shootout loss against Barden's red-hot offense. Kodey says this team falls not really because of their loss to Barden, but the injuries and depth are starting to be glaring at this point in the season. And if they cannot get healthy quick, they will be in deep trouble come April, let alone May. I will not say deep trouble. I think they still have a lot of talent over there, but the talent needs to settle in for sure. Losing Sailor Swanson is tough. I don't know if she is out for the season. I know it's a broken hand. We'll see. Or at least that's what they've been saying on the broadcasts and whatnot. But we'll see what happens, right? Janelle Francis, though, has hopped in there and she's been electric at times, and she's had a lot of turnovers at other times. Now, I think the biggest thing is, can they limit the turnovers? We'll see what happens, because I think offensively, even with the injuries, they could pace with most teams in the country. A team like Barden, who has so many weapons all around, that's going to be a tough one, especially when you're also losing a Maddie Jones, right, who I know is dealing with a lower body. I know they said ACL on the broadcast there. I don't know if it's torn or what, but that's a tough loss to also be without, a starting DB. But Wingate, they're deep enough. I think they're going to tap into their depth. They recruited for this. They're going to continue to settle in. It's not going to be easy, though. They had to play Ferrum, and then they have to play Milligan later on this week. But we'll see what this team is made of. They'll definitely have some chances to move up. Now, at 17 is Hope, who continues to climb. They climbed 2 spots this time. Kodey said 3 wins in conference can never be a bad thing. Pulling out the win against Arizona Christian was the most vital of them all. Women's college flag football said a 3-0 sweep out west. Hope International handled their business against Arizona Christian 19-7, Benedictine Mesa 32-6, and OUAZ 22-6. They consistently handle the teams they are supposed to beat, and I agree there. Gino says Hope is firmly in the driver's seat for the GSAC conference with no end in sight. The rest of that conference is still getting things figured out, and I gotta agree. Now, games could definitely get closer at the end of the season as other teams continue to grow here. Looking at the 19-7 score and 22-6 score, that could definitely be something that flips in the future. Do I envision it? Probably not, but I do think their games against the Florida teams are going to pay off, knowing the level they can play at. So we'll see. But I really feel like they are definitely the favorite to win the conference, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Now, tied at 15 is Nevada State, who stays right here, and Barton College, who moves up a couple of spots. Let's start with Nevada State. Women's college flag football said the Scorpions remain untouched out west. Idle this past week, they hold on to the perfect 10-0 record and continue to look like the part in their first season. Gino just says still top of the West, so not much to say there. Now, moving up is Barton College here, who bounces back after a tough loss to Ferrum last week. Kodey says after narrowly losing to Ferrum, the Bulldogs beat up on Chowan for 2 games, persevered over Wingate, and rolled over Mars Hill for an impressive 4 wins this week to surge up ahead of Wingate. Women's college flag football says Barton might have the most terrifying offense in the country right now. They played 4 games this week and scored 227 total points, swept Chowan, blanked Mars Hill, and won a shootout against a great Wingate team 38-27. Agreed with everything there. And then Gino says Barton took down Wingate by multiple scores, and that's plenty enough for me to slide them. Yeah, this Barton team, I got to watch that game. They have a lot of firepower on offense, and then defensively, they are extremely athletic here. Now, granted, it is an injured Wingate team, but you play who's in front of you. I think that is a quality win still to get against an injured Wingate team, because certainly a drop to them would have mattered in conference standings. And so, love that win. It looks like they're kind of back on track here and could be on a collision course set for Ferrum here in a couple weeks or months or whenever their conference tournament is. I don't think they play a second time, but we'll see. So there you go. That's Barton College. Now at 14 is St. Francis, who goes ahead and shoots up 9 spots in our rankings. Kodey said picked up some nice wins over established programs and are not the same team that lost to Siena Heights earlier in the season. This is a team I am taking seriously. Women's college flag football said do not let the 4 losses fool you. This team plays an absolute gauntlet. St. Francis went for a stellar 2-0 week where they outgunned Grayson 39-28 and then dropped 40 points on Midland. They are battle-tested and dangerous. Gino says this team is beyond legit. They have some very high-quality wins for a first-year program, and I agree there. Shout out Gianna Reyes, a fellow Filipina out there, balling out. On top of that, I did their season preview. Their weapons are coming alive. Harmony Walker has had some big games. Haley Witherspoon has been massive and has really come alive lately. Their last couple games here and has put up some great stats, mind you, on both sides of the ball. I really think they got something special going over there at St. Francis, so look out for them. Now at 13 is Daytona State, who stays right here. Gino says, I'm in the minority on the ranking here for Daytona State, but I still think that loss to Florida Gateway shows that they aren't quite a top 15 team right now. I hope they prove me wrong when they play Gateway again and make it a much closer game. Women's college flag football said the Falcons were idle this week, but remain among the premier JUCO powerhouses on the board. Their massive point differentials against quality teams do not disappear with blowout loss to rival Florida Gateway. So obviously 2 schools of thought here. Look, that loss to Florida Gateway definitely matters. It is a single game though, so we'll see what happens. But if they cannot play them closer at the very least next time, I don't know about keeping them in the top 15. So we'll see. Now at 12 is Lindsey Wilson. Women's college flag football, Kodey said beat the same team twice, not much to see here. Women's college flag football said a dominant 2-0 week. The Blue Raiders absolutely dismantled Wittenberg in back-to-back matchups, winning 51-6, 34-0. With their offense, when their offense is clicking, they look like a top 10 program. Gino says Siena Heights and Life are on the horizon in Week 7 for Lindsey Wilson. They can come out a potential top 10 team if they can come out this weekend and be undefeated. And I agree with that. Siena Heights, a quality team right there. And then you have Life here, who has definitely moved up in the rankings as of late. It's going to be an interesting opportunity for them, so we'll see what happens. Now at 11 is Kansas Wesleyan, who moves down 5 spots here. And this is why Gino said, I will keep Kansas Wesleyan in the top 10 because I knew Shihiro Wada is not going to let that loss to Ottawa go unavenged. Women's college flag football said the Coyotes suffered their first reality check of the year. After blazing through their early schedule, they hit a brick wall with the 31-6 loss to Baker. They have the offensive firepower to climb back up. Kodey said kind of a brutal way to lose for the squad, just not able to convert yards into points, and it makes me feel considerably worse how the defense was paved over. We will see how they fare against the Braves later this week, and that game has already happened, so we'll see there. But definitely a loss that I don't think any of us really expected. We thought it'd be a competitive game. This not being a competitive game is definitely a little bit of a red flag here. The response to Ottawa is going to be big. So there you go. Now at 10 is Weber, who does move down a couple of spots. Kodey says going to barely scoot down the Warriors, but they need to pull out these close ones for a chance in Nationals. Women's college flag football said a roller coaster weekend for the Warriors. They dominated Reinhardt 41-0, but lose 13-12 to Life in the Sun Conference. The margin for error is officially 0 moving forward. Gino says 2 losses now to teams that were previously ranked below them. They'll be fine, but it still feels weird having the Warriors this low in the rankings. I kind of feel like, though, that this is just about where they are. Look, I hate putting the blame on one position here, but this is a talented team. They have some good wide receivers. The defense is experienced. You know, they got some good athleticism across the board on both sides of the ball, but I do think the up and down play at the quarterback position does matter a whole bunch. It's obvious that when she struggles, or when whoever's playing quarterback struggles, the entire offense struggles, right? And this is not like anything new, right? We said this in the season previews. We said this might be an issue here. Compared to other teams in the country, you know, it's been better than some other situations where they've had to find a new quarterback. In some ways, though, it has also been worse than some other situations. And so for Weber here, I mean, they'll go as far as the quality of quarterback play is. And recently, I mean, it's been tough against some teams that, you know, we had ranked below them for a reason. And so we'll see what happens, but they are definitely teetering a little bit, trading off wins and losses here, especially losses to teams that were ranked below them. Now at 9 is Ferrum, who does move up 2 spots. Gino says big game this next week against Wingate to see who's going to take the top spot in the Conference Carolinas. Women's college flag football said Ferrum's defense deserves recognition after this week. You cannot lose if the other team never scores. And then Kodey says this team lost some steam as the week went on, but played a lot of games and will earn a couple of notches up. And I gotta agree with that as well. A little bit sloppy, you know, handling the football from the quarterback position, but they definitely have some talent here against Wingate. That's definitely a game that they need to win to maintain their spot. Now at 8 is Life here, who moves into the top 10, going up 4 spots. I believe this is the first time Life has ever been ranked to the top 10. Kodey says going to Surge, a team that has quality losses and great showings against top teams. They're trying to earn their keep, but will be tested quickly against Warner. Women's college flag football says the Giant Slayers of the week. Life pulled off the stunner of the weekend, edging out Weber 13-12 in an absolute dogfight. Their defense proved they can step up in the clutch. Gino says looking sharp as ever on both sides of the ball. Beating a team like Weber is a massive stepping stone for this team, to say the least. Now, I do know they are dealing with some injuries there. We'll see if that matters in this game against Warner later on this week. But Life, you know, looking as good as maybe ever in program history with another big win against Weber. Now at 7 is St. Thomas here, who moves up a spot. Kodey says ripped off 3 wins this week. and showed some grit along the way. Women's college flag football said the Bobcats had an incredibly busy and successful stretch, pulling out victories. They know how to win close, gritty games when the offense isn't putting up 50 points. Gino says slowly but surely climbing in the middle of what was supposed to be a rebuild season. Says a lot about the staff and players they have over there. And I agree, definitely a tough loss at the beginning of the season, but since then they've been battling. I do think, there's probably still some questions on offense, specifically at quarterback, but for now they are maintaining, so we'll see. Now at 6 is Baker, who stays right here. Gino says it has to feel good to completely dismantle Kansas Wesleyan after that tough loss to Ottawa. Baker ain't going nowhere. Women's college flag football said Baker took the loss to Ottawa out on a previously undefeated Kansas Wesleyan team, dealing KW their first loss with a massive 31-6 statement victory, then turned around the next day to shut out Houston 50-0. And I gotta agree, a great way to bounce back here. That Kansas Wesleyan loss is definitely a bit of a statement as well, so love to see that. Now at 5 is Milligan, who stays right here, and in fact our whole top 5 is the same, so just pointing that out there. But at 5 is Milligan. Kodey says still undefeated and still rolling big over other squads, especially on the D2 level. Women's college flag football says a flawless, dominant week. The Buffaloes' offense exploded for a staggering 199 points across 3 games. Milligan is making a serious case for the number 1 overall rank. Gino says, I said in the preview that Milligan might not lose a game this regular season, and that might be true. Now, I will say, and I said this last week, the only reason Milligan isn't number 1 or moving up currently is because of their strength of schedule compared to the teams ahead of them. Undefeated, but I don't think they have played a top 5 team yet. I don't know if they've played a top team, or no, they have played Ferrum before. Or I want to say they did. But other than that, I don't think they've played a top 5 team. That definitely matters. Now at 4 is Kaiser. Kodey says picked up 2 wins in conference, which is always good. Women's college flag football said the Seahawks are rolling. The offense continues to execute efficiently, proving they can consistently score in the 30s against tough mid-tier opponents. And then Gino says they're right on the brink of that top 2 spot. They could definitely be there soon, and I agree. I don't think Kaiser is going to drop here, but they need somebody in front of them to lose, and they will have an opportunity against one of these teams. At 3 is Ottawa. Kodey says 1 big to maintain. Women's college flag football says the Braves continue to take care of business with the 2-0 week, blanking North Central Missouri 36-0 and crushing Kodey 60-6. Gino says that win over Kaiser cements Ottawa as the number 2 spot for him. But in our rankings, they're currently at 3 for now. At 2 is Florida Gateway. Gino says outside of the loss to life, this has been a great year so far for Florida Gateway. Women's college flag football said the Timberwolves were idle this past week, wrestling up while the teams below them beat each other up. This early season resume, backed by high-scoring shutouts, keeps them firmly entrenched as a top-tier national title contender, which I agree with. And then at number 1 is Warner. Gino says the greatest start to a season in college flag history continues. And then women's college flag football says the Royals enjoyed a well-deserved bye week and retained their top spot. They sit comfortably at 10-0, watching the chaos unfold below them as they prepare for the home stretch. And I know this game happened yesterday, but Catherine Hutchinson has officially gone over 100 touchdowns and has breaking a record here. I don't know, for some reason I thought last week she did, but this week she definitely did it, so congrats to her. Warner is rolling. Offensively, so much firepower there. Defensively, they might have the top defense in the country as well. So we'll see what happens with Warner, but they are rolling as they continue to stay number 1. And so there you go. That's your top 25. Just outside is Penn State Harrisburg, Emmanuel Thomas and Lisa McRae. 25 Aurora, 24 Ventura, 23 Cypress, tied at 21 Gallaudet and Saddleback. 20 Immaculata, 19 Huntington, 18 Wingate, 17 Hope International, 15, tied at 15 is Nevada State and Barton College, 14 St. Francis, 13 Daytona State, 12 Lindsey Wilson, 11 Kansas Wesleyan, 10 Weber, 9 Ferrum, 8 Life, 7 St. Thomas, 6 Baker, 5 Milligan, 4 Kaiser, 3 Ottawa, 2 Florida Gateway, and at number 1 right now is Warner. Alrighty, thank you so much for rocking with us. But before I let you go, we do have an announcement. Our mid-season awards. Actually, I should say this. Our end of the season awards will be coming here soon. We're just about mid-season. I know some other teams play more into May and whatnot. So, our award show will come out after everyone's regular season has ended. And then we will just mostly be considering regular season records as well as maybe post-season. Not the whole thing, but just conference postseason play. We'll include those stats and considerations there. But, we got our awards. We've been doing them since 2022. We pick a most valuable playmaker, offensive playmaker of the year, defensive playmaker of the year, newcomer of the year, which always goes to freshman. That's a freshman award to the best newcomer. We have breakout player of the year, a player that has broken out. We have coach of the year as well. And then obviously we have our all PMC and all freshman teams, as we did do a preseason one there. And so we got a lot of awards here. Our awards, at least the individual ones like MVP, OPOY, DPOY, we will be considering players from all levels, NAI, NCAA, junior college. Before, it used to just be NAI, but we are definitely opening it up to all levels there. So it should be interesting. All PMC, all freshmen. We won't release anything mid-season for that, but I will say this. We will do an all PMC and all freshman team nationally, and then we'll do an all PMC NAI squad, all PMC D1, all PMC D2, /D1 D2, and then all PMC D3 and all PMC JUCO teams. We will do that all at the end of the season, but these awards will consider everyone. And so if you feel like there's a player that should be in consideration, hey, let us know. We are going to make a list sometime, hopefully sooner than later. We're going to release everyone that we have in consideration, at least personally, right? And we'll go from there for MVP, OPOY, DPOY, newcomer, breakout player, and coach of the year. And, players could win multiples, so we'll see about that. Also, my bad, I forgot. We have best quarterback, best receiver, best utility, best rusher, best linebacker, best DB awards as well. And we'll do a mid-season thing for that. So be on the lookout on all of our social media accounts. That's where it will be posted. Won't be posted on our website just yet, but you can check out our website at playmakerscorner.com and check out past winners of these awards here. But we just want to make sure that we post these award races since we're just about midway through this season. So there you go there. Thank you so much for rocking with us, and we will catch you later.